Well, you can tell that.
We're on the lunch break of the questioning of Graham Smith, who was one of the activists who was involved in Hackney Community Defence Association, the Colin Roach Centre. He was spied upon by 7 undercover police officers, but significantly by Mark Jenner. I'm joined by Russell Miller, who's been watching his evidence as well. I mean, we've got to the end of the regular questions. We'll be back after lunch for further questions. What have you made of what Graham Smith's had to say today?
It's fascinating stuff. I mean, Graham's very articulate. He's an expert in the field in a sense, because he's an academic now, and he was schooled from an early age, first by being beaten up by the police, which he described in very clear, emotional, and slightly traumatic detail, and then became an activist in Hackney with first the Trevor Moniville campaign and then setting up Hackney Community Defence Association. And so there's the history of that, which is phenomenal, but there's also his academic understanding. And towards the end of his evidence, he started really deconstructing the whole inquiry and really explaining what's wrong with the inquiry. And talked about institutional distancing and stuff. So, it's been a fascinating morning.
Yeah, I mean, really have. Just particularly, I mean, we'll go through some of the stuff that he was asked earlier, but just that last section where he really, he pointed out what's wrong with this process. He pointed to some other processes, like the independent panel on the murder of Daniel Morgan and their finding of institutionalized corruption. He pointed to the way in which the Metropolitan Police has undermined this inquiry, that the narrative of the police has been taken on by the inquiry. And you had this ridiculous situation where the inquiry it's been taking at face value the reports of the SDS and structuring the inquiry around them. So you had Mark Metcalfe was invited to give evidence on behalf of Hackney Community Defence Association, an organisation he was never part of because of the false police reports.
Yeah, and in fact, that targeting document, which is the Mark Jenner targeting document, which makes absolutely no sense, because essentially what it says is, we need to get a grip on anarchists, so we're going to get a grip on Metcalfe, who is, as Graham described, about the furthest thing that you could imagine from an anarchist, and HCDA. And Mark Metcalfe had very little to do with HCDA. There was only a kind of coincidental sharing of space. So all of the documents that you get to see, the lies or absurdities in them. And so you've got to somehow work out, well, why is that lie there? Is that pure stupidity, or actually is it, as Graham described very, very well, I thought at the end, the example, the comparison he made was brilliant, where he said it's rather like the situation where the police charge a victim of violence, or when they beat someone up, they usually charge that person with assault police. And he drew a parallel between that and the way in which they describe police accountability campaigns, family campaigns, campaigns for justice like HCDA, as political, extremist, anarchist, as a way of hiding the true meaning and the true purpose. And I thought that was a very good, that is police modus operandi. Police modus operandi is, if we do anything wrong, we cover it up. And if we need to cover it up, we'll generally blame someone else for what happened.
And generally the victim.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, the kind of one of the most extreme examples of that, which was mentioned today but not gone into in much detail, was Malcolm Kennedy. Yeah. Because what many people probably don't even know about Malcolm Kennedy, but the significant thing about Malcolm Kennedy is not only was he fitted up for a murder of Patrick Quinn. Patrick Quinn was killed in a cell in Hammersmith Police Station. Well, if Malcolm didn't do it, and he didn't, someone killed him in a police cell. And so that's why Malcolm's case became so significant, because if Malcolm ever proved his innocence, it proved the police had killed Patrick Quinn. And I think about the way in which the inquiry has been approached, it's so absurd. We know the police lie. We know the whole point of all of this was lying. And now you're taking their evidence as somehow credible. It's just absolute nonsense. So, I mean, Graham's done a great job of kind of deconstructing that. And there's loads of really interesting elements.
It really is, because I think it's not just in the way in which we have this absurd situation when people are being asked to disprove wild false reports, which happens pretty much every time anybody's ever questioned, but also the way that the whole inquiry is structured.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the other things Graham's done very well is illustrating how many documents are missing by pointing out, well, this says this, but this can't be the first document because that document said that, and this reference number isn't the same as that reference number. Can you help me explain that? And the inquiry is like, we're working on it, and there is a fundamental flaw in the whole way this inquiry is operating. I mean, essentially, I've described this before. This isn't a public inquiry. This is a public cover-up. Basically, what we've got is a fascinating lens, a fascinating window into the secret state's surveillance of left and police accountability groups in particular. And that lens is not created by the public inquiry. That lens is created by the Lawrence family, by the Police Spies Out of Lives campaign, which exposed these the men who deceived women into relationships. So it's the activists who have forced the inquiry and have forced documents. So if you want to understand where we are now in the Jenna, well, why are we on Jenna? Well, we're only on Jenna because Alison was deceived into a relationship with him and she exposed who he was. So by having Peter Francis having gone whistleblower and Theresa May having to set up the inquiry is now in the process of, we can't hide that. We can't hide that. We've got to talk about that. And so it all kind of cascades from a process in which, that's been exposed. So because that's been exposed, we have to release the Jenna targeting document. Because we've released the Jenna targeting document, we've got to deal with Metcalfe, we've got to deal with HCDA, all of which, they would rather not deal with. And so they drip feed, and then who they is they the inquiry, or is they the Metropolitan Police, or is they MI5? Who's actually controlling this whole thing? And, does Mitting know, and is he really behind it? I mean, but nevertheless, despite its weaknesses, and they are significant, it is an absolutely fascinating window into this world in which basically the state, by using undercover police officers, preserves the status quo and undermines radical change, whether that's radical change for police accountability or any of the other campaigns that have been infiltrated. It has nothing to do with the notion of policing, which most people understand, which is protecting people or, investigating crime. So it's an amazing window. I mean, there was a bizarre intervention. I don't know if you noticed when Graham pointed out that the reports on HCDA were being fed to Box 500 and MI5.
Yes.
And Mitting suddenly jumped in and said, "Oh no, MI5 have told me they weren't doing that then." Now, whether that's got to do with the 1983 directive from the Home Office that you shouldn't be spying on police accountability campaigns or what, I don't know. But to have the inquiry chair intervene in a witness and say, "Oh no, the fact that document says this can't be true because MI5 have told me it isn't." It's just laughable.
He was just red herring. I mean,
it was red herring, wasn't it? He said,
it was just repeatedly. And I mean, the lady doth protest too much, methinks. I mean, it was just so. And then when Graham Smith came back and said, well, yeah, but also the police said they weren't going to be taking interest in any police accountability campaigns much earlier than that. He said, that's a different issue. That's a different issue. Yeah. But on this is red herring.
That was a very smelly herring and not particularly red.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's... I mean, like you say, I mean, this is a window into a world. It's a very difficult see-through window. It's quite a murky window. We don't get to see much. But the more we look into, the more we realise is hidden. Yeah. I think you really well the way that we've only got to this point because of what activists have done. There's very occasionally we've had some bits and pieces that have been released purely down to the inquiry themselves, but they're very few and far between. Yeah. Nearly everything that we find out about, every witness the police witness that is called that creates one of these cascades is born out of the work of activists.
Yeah. And then just what we're doing now. I mean, you are the best way into the inquiry. The inquiry website is hopeless. I mean, even here, I went to the wrong entrance because it doesn't tell you on the inquiry website which way to go. And you're supposed to book if you want to come 3 months in advance. This is the most impenetrable public inquiry there has been. And I know I've said this privately, but I do want to say it publicly. You've done a fantastic job of doing these regular reports because they're the best way in for anyone to try and understand what's going on. And that's a phenomenal service that you've been doing. But also Police Spies Out of Lives, the COPS campaign, the campaigns, Southall Monitoring Group, and I'm sorry for the ones I haven't mentioned, but it is the activists, it's the families, it's the people who are affected who have driven this inquiry. And anyone who wants to know about why we're in the mess in Britain that we are really ought to follow this inquiry because it tells you a very great deal because the state has put a lot of effort into really basically spying on people in order to stop things from changing. And very specifically, what we'll be talking about today is to stop the people who are trying to deal with police violence and police racism. So it's phenomenal.
And not just police violence, not just police racism, but police criminality. And I thought that Graham Smith did a really good job of saying that it needs to be named as police criminality. That, you know, if anybody else was to beat someone up or do any of these things that police were guilty of, then it would be treated as a crime. Yet with the police, it was treated as a complaint and something to be brushed over and moved on from.
Yeah, and that's one of the kind of whole structural issues around power. That what you do if you want to maintain power and you want to prevent change is you use all sorts of barriers to prevent that change. And one of those barriers in relation to police. I thought the inquiry dealt with that reasonably well, because they referenced Graham's publication, A Crime is a Crime is a Crime. And that gave Graham the opportunity to say, yes. And I gave it to a member of the Royal Commission who was investigating the Birmingham 6 miscarriage of justice. And he said, can I give it to Peter Imbert, who was the Metropolitan Police Commissioner? I was like, so it went right to the top. They knew exactly what was going on. They don't, again, it's an illustration of why you don't need spies. I mean, Jenna infiltrates HCDA, but actually HCDA gave their pamphlet to the Metropolitan Police Commissioner. It's like, if you want to know, if you want to make change, if you want to address the problems, there's plenty of ways of doing it. The only reason for spying on people is because you don't want to address the problems and you want to keep it quiet.
Right, absolutely. And you want to go in there and you want to steer the direction of what these groups are doing, what people are engaged with, and have an influence on the process.
Yeah, and there's a really, really important point that Graham raised about an individual within HCDA and the Colin Roach Centre, who Graham described as being chased out by Mark Jenner. He described Mark Jenner's behavior at meetings. He said he didn't have an awful lot of contact with Mark Jenner, but one of the reasons being that he didn't like him. He found him very aggressive, and he didn't like his attitude. But very specifically, Jenner basically threatened this individual that he couldn't be a member of the Labour Party and a member of the Colin Roach Centre. I'm not naming him because he's not been named, but I mean, I do know him. And this is an example of this other element of undercover and state infiltration, which is basically sabotage. And Graham is significant because he worked in Parliament and he was able to give access to certain documents, and you could see why from the Metropolitan Police's point of view. But HCDA was phenomenally successful, and the reason it was so successful is because it was very grassroots. Your case generally would not be discussed at an HCDA meeting unless you attended. It was very much, this is a self-help group. You've got to be there if you want to be involved. But it linked those people to lawyers, to journalists, and it built a very, very effective mechanism for raising police accountability and police misconduct. And so it's very interesting that Jenner chose to isolate and intimidate someone who was connected to Parliament, connected to Labour Party, and it maybe that was a targeting deliberate strategy, not just of subversion of the group, but also of specifically targeting that element to weaken some of the connections within HCDA.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly significant, and really, it shows that when we compare that targeting document compared to what actually these groups were about, you kind of see that there was a very disingenuous approach, which Graham called out quite directly to the SDS. We're clearly going after an organisation that was doing police monitoring, but going like, oh, they're anarchists. It's the anarchists. We need to stop the anarchists.
Yeah, I mean, I think that whole targeting document, I haven't seen the whole document. I really want to look at the whole document because it's bizarre. It starts off by saying, oh, we've forgotten to look at anarchism and we need to look into anarchism. And we got this new guy and we're going to put him into Hackney and he can kind of get involved with these anarchists, such as Mark Metcalfe. And HCDA, and it's like, no, sorry, that doesn't make any sense at all. And so it looks like a cover story, so that even within their own secret documents, there is a cover story. And this is, I think, a thing that people have missed. I think that this was true of the Lawrence campaign, where this whole smear that Lawrence campaign and others, these weren't genuinely black family justice campaigns. Actually, what they are is a bunch of dodgy lefties who are trying to exploit these poor people. Not that we killed these people or we failed to investigate these crimes, and that these people are upset and want justice. But no, they're being manipulated by Marxists. So what there is within the documentation is an internal justification process within Special Branch and presumably to the funders, to the Home Office or MI5, which creates this narrative. Just as you've got the narrative, oh, we don't commit crime, we just have misconduct, or we just have complaints. You've got another narrative, which is there aren't genuine police accountability campaigns. There are extremists. There are anarchists, and you know, it is a fascinating window, but it takes a bit of thought and it takes a bit of analysis to try and work out, well, why does that say what it says? Because it doesn't appear to make sense.
And it really feels like the inquiry hasn't done that.
No.
It hasn't taken the time. It hasn't done the analysis. We've spent so much time, particularly when it comes to the most egregious version is as you said, the Black Family Justice campaigns, basically being asked mostly if they were extremists. What were their connections with these groups?
And
Were
are
they
you violent?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Over and over again.
Yeah. You're exactly right. But also on the other hand, when they have the SDS officers giving evidence, it's just letting them lie or letting them say, "Oh, I can't remember," and very little kind of really drilling, inquisitive work. So yes, I mean, I think Graham's point about the institutional distancing, I think that applies massively at the inquiry itself, not yes, because there is a lack of. There's a huge excessive credulity and a lack of investigation into these reports, because you can join the dots. You know, it's not that complicated. It's very, very difficult because we don't have a lot of the information. But Graham did it himself. It was like, well, that reference isn't the same as that reference, which means there's two files. And if there's two files, then this isn't the first one in that file. And, you know, any of us can do that, and they've got a bank of lawyers.
Yeah, and I mean the fact that there's so little attempt to look at contemporaneous stuff around what these deployments. That I mean, it'd be very easy for so many demonstrations that they're reported on, if not in the mainstream press, then the radical press.
Or in the Met Police files.
Right. Yeah, there's literally.
Were you violent on this demonstration? Well, check your files. The files say no one was arrested.
Yeah, I mean, it just really basic stuff. And I mean, the way they are taking these reports at face value over and over again. And I mean, they've been called out on this from day one of the inquiry process, yet they are still doing it.
Exactly. Month one, you know, maybe in year one.
Yeah.
But where are we now?
Yeah, well, I mean, year 10. I mean, technically, year 5 of actual kind of content hearings. But yeah, I mean, the inquiry is not. There have been a lot of ways in which the inquiry has like kind of had to readjust itself slightly as it becomes very obvious that the way they're operating isn't acceptable. But on this matter, which goes to really the heart of the entire process, they seem unwilling to learn and continue to just take face value and act accordingly.
And I think that's where Graham did achieve quite a lot today, because he took them a bit further than they have done previously. And I mean, I think the questioning was reasonably good as well. It didn't dwell too much on irrelevancies. It was quite useful. But I think this is the thing about all processes. Everything is organic. You know, even an inquiry is organic. And you look at how the Macpherson inquiry developed. The Macpherson inquiry developed partly because there were lay judges, or rather lay members who weren't judges, and so were able to bring a world experience. And Mitting has massively failed. He either is not smart enough to realize he needed that, or he's smart enough to realize that would actually force him to go places he doesn't want to go. And you know, the appalling instance a week or so ago where he thanked a witness for being calm and not too emotional and having no rancor. I mean, it really exposes the fact that he finds it very uncomfortable when a victim or someone who maybe usually has lost a member of a family, has not had any justice whatsoever, has been spied on and treated appallingly by the police, inquiry says, "Oh, when did this happen? How did that happen? Well, how do you feel about that?" You know, draws it all out, and suddenly Mitting gets all uncomfortable because all this is getting a bit emotional. And you know, is this an inquiry or not? I mean, I just saw the banner for the inquiry, and it says "Getting to the Truth of Undercover Policing." Well, I'm not sure that is really what this inquiry is about. I mean, it's certainly where the activists are coming from. And as I say, paying fantastic tribute to those who've been here. I would like to be here much more. There is an awful lot that can be discovered from the limited lens we've got. But, you know, we are being allowed a kind of pinhole into this whole thing, or a series of pinholes. And lots of stuff is coming out. But obviously, the stuff they really, really want to hide, that's the stuff we're not seeing.
Yeah.
So
we get glimpses every so often. Something's referenced. It's like, and that opens up a whole world of new questions, which we don't get answers to, but opens up a lot of questions, which is a start.
Yeah, I mean, like the James Blonde stuff. I mean, I haven't followed that particularly, but you know, some cop goes to France to pick up a gun to frame someone for an attempted murder. And it's like that only came out. You know, the actual guy who got framed didn't know what about it.
I mean, he described that as the most significant thing that ever happened in his life that he had no idea about. Yeah, I mean, just insane. I really felt today that the inquiry met like the man who knows.
Yeah.
We really got that sense that like, and I mean, like judging by a couple of his reactions, which really, like, he was clearly uncomfortable that the things that Graham Smith was saying, and the few questions that he asked himself, you're asking, well, can you help me with this matter or that matter, really went to the heart of what the inquiry's facing. And he really questioned the integrity of the inquiry quite forensically. I mean, like, not just like in general terms, but on very specific points in the way in which they're operating. And Mitting had no answer for that.
No, and I think the other problem for Mitting is, you know, Graham's now a professor of law. You know, he's got a PhD. You know, he's not some grungy anarchist who you can kind of dismiss. No disrespect to grungy anarchists, but you know, the thing is, and he comes across very articulate and comes across with an authority. And you know, he works with the police now, and he's got an enormous amount of credibility within that field. It's not coming from the perspective of the state is the enemy. It's coming from the perspective, well, if you do actually want to do policing better, you've got to look at some of these things, and we'll see whether or not it makes any difference. I mean, by this stage, I think we're all pretty clear it's not going to make much difference. But I think everything that comes out is of value. It's the fact that the inquiry is failing doesn't mean it's of no value. It's a fantastic one who wants to study, you know, a bit of British political history of the time and how the state responds to it. You'd be mad not to dive into this stuff because it's gold dust.
I really think the secret history of Britain, particularly when it comes to policing, but also, you know, when it comes to social change and the way in which you know, the state has guided and controlled what actually happens, and has sought to undermine and discredit and destroy movements for social change of any sort, whether that's police accountability, for justice, or for anything else.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you know, you could, you know, if you look back and you could say, well, because the country is in such a brilliant place, they did a great job. But I think, generally speaking, there aren't many people on any side of the political spectrum who think the country's in a great place. And it's not a subversion of basic political activity. You know, I mean, as Graham was describing, you know, what you've got is people discussing politics. You know, they talk about, oh, well, shall we set up this group? Well, no, I don't want to set up that group. I want to do this. I think it's more important that we do that. And it's those discussions that they're spying on. And and you know, with the Labour Party, and he seems to have some influence, so let's get rid of him. You know, it's the most blatant. You know, they use the term subversion to describe us. They're constantly subverting us. That's what they do.
Every accusation is a confession. Yeah, Graham Smith is going to come back this afternoon to see if there's any further questions for him under Rule 10. There may be re-examination by his own lawyer. I don't know if that's going to be the case. I think given how to the point he's been, and we've covered so much ground, is there anything else you'd like him to be asked about?
That's a good question. I mean, I think there's still a massive issue as to what was Jenner's real target. What was the real purpose of the deployment? But also the 7 other officers who apparently infiltrated HCDA, or at least had HCDA as a target. And you know, how did they come to be reporting on HCDA a month after it was set up? Well, that means you must. I mean, it was Trevor Morris in the Trevor Monaville campaign. I can't remember.
So he reported on it. He wasn't actually an active.
So I mean, obviously there was a long-term targeting strategy here, which goes to the point that clearly that targeting strategy for Jenner is disingenuous. He's clearly dishonest. There's a very long-term interest in Hackney, in police accountability in Hackney, because obviously this goes way back. You know, before Trevor Monaville, you have Colin Roach. You know, the Colin Roach Centre was named after a guy who was shot dead in Stonington police station, and you know, a whole series of other campaigns in Hackney. So there's been a very long-term interest of the state in that area, and it doesn't add up the way in which the Jenner deployment is described in the targeting document. Now, is that because that's the way in which the Met Police chose to frame it, because the Met Police wanted to target HCDA, or does it come from MI5, where a lot of the targeting actually comes from? So massive questions. Now, presumably Graham can't help with that, but if the inquiry bothered to analyze the targeting document in real forensic detail, it might be that Graham would be able to say, oh, well, really, no, that's what they're you know, because at the moment all we're able to say is, no, you didn't target Mark Metcalf because he was an anarchist, because he wasn't. You targeted HCDA because it was investigating police crime. And I think, from my point of view as an ex-lawyer, that the interesting thing is, well, not what we haven't got, but what have we got? We've got the stuff. I mean, the stuff we haven't got is interesting, but we can't really talk about it. What we have got is stuff that doesn't make sense. So let's make sense of it.
Yeah, absolutely. We can only hope that that's what the inquiry does. I mean, at the moment, I'm always frustrated by the questions they choose to ask, the areas that they seem to lack any sort of curiosity into, and the unwillingness really to look outside of the reports for what actually was going on at any given time.
Yeah, and I mean, the other failing is not calling enough activists. Mark Jenner will give evidence for 4 days next week. What they do is they cram activists into relatively short periods, and so you lose the opportunity to go into detail. I mean, Mark Metcalf talked at length yesterday, but he didn't actually get into the detail of a lot of the documents, and that's a failing. I mean, to be fair, he's not an easy witness to cross-examine, but that's not the point. The point is, if he was given 2 days of evidence, then you could get round to it.
And also, they're not calling lots of activists who have a lot to offer. I mean, particularly Dave Smith in terms of blacklisting, which is a ridiculous thing to leave out. Just doesn't make sense.
But I mean, dozens and dozens. As far as I know, I don't know any document in which my name is there, but I helped set up DIS. I mean, I was the solicitor behind setting up DIS. So, I mean, probably if I'd pushed, I could have become a core participant. But, why didn't they contact me? Why aren't they contacting? I mean, they've never released the cover names for numerous of these people. How many other women were deceived into relationships and we don't know? This is the inquiry. It's supposed to get to the bottom of it. I mean, uncovering the truth.
Come on, yeah. I mean, one of the things, particularly given the high levels of secrecy on anything to do with any other kind of officers, we had a moment today where someone was named because in one of the reports it was referred to as a pen name of Norman Blair from Class War. And when Graham Smith was asked about it, he said, this person should have privacy. Why is this person being named? They haven't been contacted as far as I know. That should be a privacy. And to which John Mitty had to intervene and go, oh, yes, they should have been, but our systems aren't perfect. I mean, it's more than they're not perfect, but this has happened time and time again. People are being named, members of the public are being named. The inquiry is often like public profile. And in some cases, that public profile is, they volunteered at a bookshop in the 80s. I mean, like, just nonsense.
And we're on the other side, you've got police officers who are known to have been involved in all sorts of appalling activity, and they get anonymity. And I mean, I think the other thing is, you can't help but think this is actually preserving some of the credibility of these false reports, because the woman who was named is obviously a real person, not a pen name. I mean, I knew her; she was key to HCDA, certainly in the early days, and the police must know that. So why hasn't she been given an anonymity? Because they want to pretend that she didn't exist, and really she's a cover for Norman Blair. Yeah, and it's nonsense. But worse than that, not only because now and again maybe mistakes will be made, but they're threatening to ban you from reporting because occasionally mistakes get made. And it's like, well, there's clearly one law for one, and so clearly what this inquiry is about is covering up, and what we're about is trying to get as much out there as anything. So more power to your elbow. You're doing a great job, and so is everyone else here.
Thanks.
And I'll try and come down more.
Yeah, please do. We'll be going back after lunch to see if there's any further questions. After that, the inquiry finishes for the week. Next week, we will be hearing from Mark Jenner himself. He will be questioned over 4 days. Will you be here down for any of that?
I'll try and come down. I mean, it will be interesting, but my worry is, why would he tell the truth? Why would he say anything? It's getting more and more difficult for them to run the I can't remember excuse, because we're getting further and further along the timeline. So 1968, I can't remember, fair enough. 1995, that's going to be a bit more difficult.
Yeah, I'm sure that won't stop him. I think the only times we have got any sort of truth out of undercover officers, apart from Peter Francis, who went whistleblower, has been almost by their mistake, by their error, by their trying to be too clever. So let's hope he just tries to be too clever.
Yeah, exactly. Doing Andy Coles.
Yeah, exactly. Doing Andy Coles. Right, thanks for watching. We're doing another video after the end. Graham Smith told me he will join me for one of these videos at the end. So hopefully when I see you again, I'll be with him. All right, cheers for now.
Cheers.
Anything else you want to add?
No, we're good. Thank you.